Welcome back for the next segment of the ALA Roundtable Queertacular. So, as part, we've been doing a day-long event celebrating all things LGBTQIA+, where we've been looking at games, comics, graphic novels, and now we are talking about film and multimedia. So, I am Atina Lavanos Probst, she, her, and I am the current chair of the Film and Multimedia Roundtable of the ALA, and so welcome to the film portion of today's event. So we are currently live. However, if you need to leave or would like to rewatch, we're going to be putting the video on Twitch on demand after the segment ends. The streaming clips will only be available over the weekend because we want to make sure that we protect our copyright holders' rights. But the interview with Rodney and I will be available for you after for as long as you'd like. So links to all the places. We have a really amazing resource list. It's going to be put in the Twitch chat and available for you long term as well. That includes links to where you can see the whole film, buy the whole film, all that good stuff. And we are really excited for you to check those out. We've been working on them really hard. It's impressive. It's a lot of really amazing things. So for our portion of the party here, we are going to be hosting a screening of the award-winning film, Brother to Brother, which was written and directed by Rodney Evans, who is here with us today.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
And hi, Athena. Thank you for having me.
Rodney, do you want to give us like a tiny intro about the film before we watch these clips you've picked for us?
Sure. Brother to Brother is a feature-length drama that centers on the friendship between a young gay African-American artist who's been thrown out of his house for being gay and an elderly Black painter slash writer named Bruce Nugent, who came of age during the Harlem Renaissance. And it's about how his memories of the Renaissance helped to center Perry and give him a feeling of belonging in the world.
Sounds so good. And so what we're going to do, we're going to screen these two clips, then we're going to come back for Q&A with Rodney. And definitely as you're watching, as you're thinking about it, feel free to start posting your questions in the chat as well. We have some questions prepared and we are more than happy to answer what you guys come up with. So without further ado, here is Brother to Brother. And we are back. I will say like the way that those two clips end just makes me want to like dissolve in a little crying puddle each time. So I'm gonna try to pull myself back from that because that ends with needing a hug. But I would like to make sure everyone is introduced to Rodney Evans, who wrote and directed Brother to Brother. That is available. You guys can pick it up for your libraries right away because obviously it's amazing. And yeah, we've made everyone cry. Rodney, you made us all cry. Thank you.
Great. Job done. Mission accomplished.
So one of the things I wanted to like dive in on asking you is like you're running these two parallel stories that are like they marry each other, they're telling different things going at different times. Like how did you approach like these completely different yet very interconnected narratives of both Bruce and Perry while you were doing this story?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I think that each film really tells you what it needs to be, and I think it's a little bit too like clean and incorrect for me to say that like that form came really easily to me. Like at a certain point, I thought this film might be more of a mosaic, like akin to the literary anthology that preceded it that's called Brother to Brother, that has a lot of Black gay male voices, that was edited by Joseph Beam and Essex Hemphill. That was a big inspiration. But you know, the more that I started to think about what I wanted my first fiction feature to be, the more I started to think about you know, things that I had heard about my short docs like on the festival circuit, and people, there was a specific doc I made called Close to Home that dealt with me coming out within a culturally conservative Jamaican family, and breaking up on camera with like younger quote unquote straight guy, and people really kind of wanting to see more of that story. And so there are words that come out of Perry's mouth that are literally things that I say in that documentary. So people, wanting to see, asking me what a fiction feature of aspects of my life would look like. And then I think I started to think about what my life would be like if I lived in a different time period. And then that led me to the Harlem Renaissance and the gay underground within the Harlem Renaissance, and specifically like a VHS tape of Bruce Nugent in the Schomburg Library in Harlem with my friend Yoruba Richin, who is like an incredible documentary filmmaker in her own right. But we were there and we were both just like, this guy's amazing. Like he's the movie. Like he's just the movie. And I was like, yes, yes, absolutely. And
Sometimes you're just like,
so
that's the thing.
yeah, and so I just went down this rabbit hole of like researching Bruce and his crew of people that like literally wrote this journal called Fire, and that he was contemporaries with Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and Wallace Thurman, and it just felt like the right structure was to mirror my own path of discovery and love for Bruce and these transgressive artists within the Renaissance, within the character of Perry, and how that would make him feel more comfortable within his own skin. And I also think that that mirrored a lot of relationships that Bruce in his elderly years had with younger people. Like they just felt incredibly comfortable around him and open around him. And so, the trick was just like trying to find the right balance between the two and not letting one kind of overwhelm the other. And I didn't want to do a thing where one was sort of like a framing device to tell the other story, because I just feel like
Right.
that's overdone. But I really wanted to figure out a structure that could like hold the weight of both stories, where you feel the power and the heft of both of them, and but still are experiencing the power that these stories have for
Mhm.
Perry, who is struggling to find his place in the world.
So I want to talk a little bit about that element of finding your place. Like we saw this really clearly in the brunch scene where there's just so much like joy and love and camaraderie, but it's a found family. It's like they've chosen these people, and you have this with Perry, who he has his good friend who's like, I'm your family. And he's like, yes, you are, because his father is not his family anymore. And can you just talk about the importance of that like found chosen family, like particularly in queer spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that like for me, just growing up, like, and always knowing that I was queer, like I always gravitated towards spaces that were queer and wanting to put myself there. You know what I mean? From a very young age, like it was very intentional. Like I just remember growing up in like, you know, Black middle class suburb in Jamaica, Queens, close to Kennedy Airport, where no one was out in queer. And if you were queer, you weren't out about it. Like you didn't talk about it. And I just remember specifically taking the test for Stuyvesant High School, literally because it was in the East Village on 14th Street between First and Second Avenue. And I was like, oh, that's where all the queer people are. So I'm gonna go and like get out of the subway, and they're gonna be like, same-sex couples and people with like green mohawks and like, I don't know, studded necklaces, leather necklaces, and like piercings and like I'm gonna be good there. So like I'm just gonna study real hard and like and try to go to school there. And that's literally what happened. Like I was very conscious about just wanting to be in neighborhoods and spaces that were queer friendly. And then when I got to those environments, finding queer friendly creative types that were transgressive and provocateurs. Like
Yeah.
those were my people, and they're still my people, like decades later. Those are people that are still like very good friends of mine. So yeah, that's been like a lifelong commitment and a kind of a rule to live by,
I love the idea of the intersection of like your chosen family and like a literal queer space. I'm just thinking the people who are right after us are maps who are talking about like literal gay spaces and gay
Mhm.
friendly spaces in a very
Yeah,
tangible way.
yeah,
And it's like we all want to gravitate towards a place and people we feel safe around. Um,
absolutely.
yeah. Um, yeah,
And it's
you're
not a given in this day and
no.
age, you know what I mean? Like you have to fight for those spaces, and there's so much hostility against the creation of those spaces that yeah, I mean it's always been so fraught. But even I think things have changed a lot since I was a teenager. Like I was certainly not out in high school, and the two kids that were out were miserable, you know what I mean? And I was like, I can't, look, like they seem like really depressed and alone, and like I can't, now is not the right time for me to. So I waited until college, you know what I mean, where it was almost like the norm for queer identity and queer exploration to at least be within your community, right? If you're gonna go to the most like left um you know progressive of like the Ivy. Like I went to Brown, and so like you just expect like at those places that like, and that's one of the reasons why you go there is because like that's where those open queer spaces are going to be
Yeah.
cultivated,
Yep.
right? So that was like I was like that's number one. That's on the top of my list because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple really meaty questions coming in over the chat.
Great.
So one of them is from So on Wednesday of I'd love to hear more about how you went about portraying the Harlem Renaissance. It's evident that there was a lot of research that went into it, like the Review of Fire, just for example. Like, tell me about the research process for this.
Yeah, it was like 3 years, and it went kind of in tandem with the screenwriting process. And I discovered my love of artist residencies in the writing and research of this film, where you would literally go with like a suitcase of books. Like I would literally choose like books over clothes
We're
and
librarians here, we all get that.
yeah, and literally just immerse myself in the biographies of you know the members of the Harlem Renaissance. I have to say that there was someone who was very close to Bruce Nugent towards the end of his life was Thomas Worth, who was the executor of his estate, and he was very, very generous with me. He had done about close to 30 hours of audio interviews with Bruce. So he literally just handed me copies of those cassettes. And so I could hear Bruce's voice, and I could hear him
Nice.
telling these stories in his own voice. They also wrote very thinly veiled autobiographical novels about their time in the manor when they were living together. So Wallace Thurman's is called Infants of the Spring. Bruce Nugent's was published only like recently after the film and after the collection of his work that Thomas had put out, which is called Richard Bruce Nugent, Gay Rebel of the Harlem Renaissance. But he was very open with sharing all of his paintings and writing with me before it was published. And so all of that material, biographies of Zora Neale Hurston, of Langston Hughes, all of that material, listening to the audio interviews, watching 16 millimeter footage that Zora had shot, listening to her tell stories and sing songs that she had collected. After a while, you get the scene from so many vantage points that it starts to kind of form in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a little bit about how that research process went, but it was very like multi-layered and took many years, and it was like a deep dive.
Yeah. Although there in the chat there was a realization that books over clothes needs to be one of the ribbons that we give out at ALA next year.
Absolutely.
Books over clothes. One last question for you coming from the chat as well. Do you have any thoughts about the role of music in both the storylines and the setting? Obviously, they're both soundtracked very differently, and those were your decisions. So, like you were
Yes.
just talking about the importance of hearing that voice. How did music tie into it?
We had an incredible music supervisor named Bill Coleman who just reached out to me last week and was like, I'm gonna put all this music out on SoundCloud. And like, I was going through all of the drives, and this is an incredible soundtrack. It's one of the soundtracks I'm most proud of. But we really tried to find pieces, like Cassandra Wilson's "I've Known Rivers" that closes the film. That wasn't in part of the clips, but it's the end credit song. And so, that's a song that uses Langston Hughes's poem, but Cassandra Wilson is interpreting it with her beautiful voice. And then you have, you know, um, hip hop inflections like scratching and but then you also have like jazz horns. And so we tried to find things that had kind of layered musical history within the track. And sometimes we would build that in the temp track. And then the composer, who was Mark Anthony Thompson, who goes by the name Chocolate Genius, and he lives up to the title.
It's a fantastic thing to call yourself.
Yeah, and he lives up to the moniker. He's earned that moniker, and he would create songs that so he created a lot of like the thematic music, like the piano music, but then he also put together like a live jazz band that just did like recordings, like live jazz sessions for those period tunes, because the originals were just too expensive for our budget. So we just had to kind of create our own jazz period tunes. And so so that was a whole other journey that was fantastic.
Sounds amazing. We have just a couple minutes with you left because we have to give everyone like bio breaks between sessions. Is there anything we have one. Oh, that's the random spam post that came in. That's not a question. So, Ronnie, any last words you would like to share with us? Any last impressions about your work or anything? You have like a completely open floor.
I'm just very grateful to be here. I'm really happy that this film has had such a fantastic life and that it still speaks to people now. it was a real challenge to get this film made. I don't know if this film would get made today. It's given the climate and the kinds of consolidation that have happened within the industry. So I'm just grateful that it exists and that it can be an amalgamation of so many voices and experiences. And I have to say that, part of my reason for wanting to become a filmmaker was because of the lack of Black queer representation. And, being in college and being shown Marlon Riggs's Tongues Untied and Isaac Julian's Looking for Langston, and that being it. You know what I mean? Them being like, that's all we have. And instead of complaining about it, I was like, you know what? I have to be about it. I have to go out and make what is not there. And so I'm glad I've had, been able to continue to contribute and, keep thriving, and that the film keeps finding new audiences with each new generation. And so I just feel blessed in that way. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Like we were just talking earlier about the importance of like literally getting to see yourself. Um, and just like how it changes the world for kids. And I love that you had like an elder gay and like a younger one. Is like because gayness isn't new, and that's part of
Right.
the film, and just that we've always been here.
Yeah.
And I just thank you so much for your time and sharing this with us. In the resource document, again, there are links to the film where you can go and add it to your collection um,
Yep.
for your own libraries.
Yep.
So
newdayfilms.com/film/brother to brother. There it is, waiting
right.
for you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This was fantastic. Rodney, you're a delightful person. I'm so glad I've got to meet you over the course of prepping for this.
Absolutely.
And um, we will be back in about 15 minutes to talk about like literal queer spaces with the Maps and Geospatial Roundtable is up next, and they will be on at 4 p.m.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, everybody.